You open the cabinet under the kitchen sink. There are 6 bottles in there: ant spray, roach gel, perimeter spray, something labeled multi-insect killer, an ultrasonic plug-in you bought last spring and forgot about, a half-empty can of something that smells like a gas station bathroom. You spent somewhere around $50–60 on all of that. The ants came back anyway, 3 weeks after the spray. Same counter, same line. Moving toward the stove like nothing happened. That is not a pest problem. That is a system problem. And the system you have right now is 6 bottles that each solve one thing for 2 weeks, sold to you by an aisle that gets longer every year. Harold did not have that cabinet. Harold had a metal tackle box. He managed an 18-unit apartment building in Chicago for over 30 years. Ground floor units, old brick construction. The kind of building where something is always finding a way in. Cockroaches from the basement, mice through the utility gaps, ants through the window frames in summer. Harold wore a canvas work apron with deep pockets. He kept the metal box in the utility closet next to the water shutoffs. He was the kind of man who fixed the problem before you knew you had one. In 30 years, Harold never signed a single exterminator contract. Not one. His entire pest barrier cost less than $4 in materials, and it worked on an industrial scale. Not on a farm, not in a rural house with a root cellar and a barn cat, in an urban apartment building in the middle of Chicago. What Harold kept in that metal box, and why modern homes replaced it with a cabinet full of specialty bottles, is what this is about. The utility closet where Harold worked smelled like old pipe insulation and concrete dust. One bare bulb overhead. A work table where he kept the box. He would open it the same way every time, slow, checking inventory, not rushing, no dramatic reveal, just a man who knew what he had and what he was about to do with it. Inside. A small cardboard container of boric acid powder, a bag of white granular material that looked like flour but wasn't, a roll of steel wool, a tube of caulk. That was the whole system. He called it his building routine. Not a hack, not a trick. A routine, something he ran twice a year on every unit whether he saw pests or not. That distinction matters more than anything else in what follows. Harold was not reacting to pest problems. He was running a barrier that made pest problems structurally unlikely. The 3 parts of his system were this: a slow-acting bait that killed colonies from the inside out, a physical powder barrier that insects could not survive crossing, and a sealing habit that closed the doors they were using to get in. Each one did a different job. Together, they covered the whole problem. None of them required a professional, a contract, a monthly service, or a shelf of single-use sprays. Start with the bait. Harold mixed boric acid with sugar, not a complicated ratio. Roughly 1% boric acid dissolved in a sugar syrup, more sugar than boric acid by a wide margin. He applied it with a small brush in tight, hidden places. Behind the stove, inside the gap at the back of the undersink cabinet, behind the kick plate of the refrigerator. Never on a countertop. Never on a surface where food was prepared or where a child or pet could reach. He was not trying to kill the ant or cockroach he could see. He was trying to kill the one he couldn't. Here is how it works. Boric acid is a metabolic poison. When a cockroach or ant ingests it, the compound disrupts the internal bacteria those insects depend on to digest food. It does not kill immediately. It takes 3 to 5 days. That delay is the entire point. The worker carries the bait back to the colony. It gets shared through feeding. The queen gets it. The colony collapses from the inside, not from the outside. You never see the bodies. You just stop seeing the problem. A spray that kills the cockroach you can see accomplishes nothing lasting. The colony is behind the wall. Harold knew that from his first winter on the job. He was not interested in the one you could see. He was interested in the one doing the reproducing. Professional cockroach treatment for a single apartment today runs somewhere between $120 and $280. Harold's boric acid bait costs a few cents per application and comes in a container that lasts years without losing effectiveness. There is one hard safety line here. Boric acid is not safe in large quantities for pets or children. And it should never be applied on food contact surfaces or in areas accessible to animals. The dose matters. Harold applied it exclusively in areas with 0 foot traffic and 0 access for pets, behind appliances, inside wall gaps. Under fixed cabinetry, if you cannot get to it easily, neither can your dog. That is the rule. It is not complicated, it is just specific. The second part of the system was the white powder diatomaceous earth, food grade. Not the kind sold for swimming pool filters. That version has been processed at high heat and contains a form of crystalline silica that damages lung tissue with repeated exposure. The food grade version is different. Same base material. but unprocessed, with a crystalline silica content below 1% and effective in a completely different way than any chemical spray on the shelf. Harold dusted a thin line of it along baseboards, behind the refrigerator, under the lip of the stove, along the threshold under the back door, any path where an ant or cockroach would need to crawl to get from outside to inside. The mechanism is physical, not chemical. Diatomaceous earth is made of fossilized microscopic algae diatoms, with edges sharp enough at the microscopic level to cut through the waxy protective coating that insects use to hold moisture inside their bodies. Once that coating is breached, the insect loses water and dies of dehydration within 24 to 72 hours. No poison, no chemical reaction, just physics and time. The dead insect does not trigger chemical resistance in the colony. There is nothing for the colony to adapt to. A line of food-grade diatomaceous earth laid correctly along a baseboard will outlast any perimeter spray treatment, will not degrade from indoor exposure, and costs a fraction of a professional service visit. One rule when applying it: wear a dust mask. Any fine mineral powder, even a chemically inert one, irritates the airways if you breathe it in during application. Put on a simple dust mask. Apply a thin, even line with a squeeze bottle or bellows applicator and leave the area for a few minutes. That is the entire precaution. Harold kept a paper mask hanging on a nail in the utility closet right next to the bag. The third part of Harold's system was the boring part, the part people skip. And the reason they end up buying the same spray 6 months later: he sealed the building, every spring and every fall. Harold walked the perimeter of each unit with a flashlight and a notepad. He was not in a hurry. He moved along baseboards, looked at where utility pipes entered walls, checked under door thresholds, looked at any gap where concrete met wood or pipe met drywall. What he was looking for was simple: any opening larger than about 1/4 of an inch. Roughly the width of a pencil eraser. That is the threshold. Mice can enter through an opening that size. Cockroaches need even less. If the gap exists, the building is not sealed. And the bait and the barrier are working on a problem with an open front door. Harold filled structural gaps with steel wool first, packed tight, then applied caulk over it. Steel wool because rodents cannot chew through it. Their teeth are not built for metal fibers under compression. Caulk because insects cannot navigate hardened sealant, and it closes the air gap that carries odor signals out to foraging ants. Floor drains in utility rooms and bathrooms got gravity-close grates to prevent cockroaches from using the plumbing as a highway. That single change, a grate that cost less than $5, eliminated an entire entry vector Harold had fought in 2 ground floor units his first year. The ceiling step is the one modern pest control services almost never include in their base service price. You can hire a company, pay $200 for a perimeter spray treatment, and have the same cockroaches back in 3 weeks because the gap under your kitchen sink pipe is still open. The chemical degrades, the spray wears off, the gap does not close itself. Harold sealed the gap first, applied the system second. In that order every time. Now consider how this works in the home you actually live in, because Harold's system was not a farm method. It was not rural. It was not tied to a root cellar or a barn or a half-acre of property. In a modern apartment, boric acid bait goes behind the stove and refrigerator, both of which exist in every apartment on Earth. Food-grade diatomaceous earth goes along the baseboard in the kitchen and bathroom, 2 short lines, hidden behind furniture or along the wall edge near the floor. The ceiling inspection takes 20 minutes with a flashlight and a tube of caulk from any hardware store. No contractor. No landlord permission required for filling a gap under a pipe with steel wool. In a rental unit, you are not making structural changes. You are applying a powder in a location a tenant can access and remove. You are filling a gap with steel wool that pulls out in 30 seconds if you leave. Nothing here requires a drill or a permit or a conversation with building management. For a senior household with limited storage and limited mobility, the entire system fits in a shoebox. The boric acid container is smaller than a salt shaker. The food-grade diatomaceous earth bag is the size of a box of pasta. The steel wool and a small tube of caulk come from any hardware store for under $10 combined. The application requires no kneeling, no climbing, and no special equipment beyond a squeeze bottle and a dust mask. The pest control industry does not want this system to be your first call, not because of conspiracy. Because there is no recurring revenue in a routine you run yourself twice a year with materials that cost less than a single service visit. The business model is not pest elimination. The business model is the monthly contract, the quarterly visit, the preventative treatment you pay for whether you have an active problem or not. Harold ran his system twice a year and did not have a monthly contract. The math on that, spread over 30 years and 18 apartments, is not subtle. This is how the undersink cabinet got so full. After World War II, synthetic chemical compounds developed for wartime applications became available for residential and commercial pest control. Products that had existed only for agricultural or industrial use were reformulated and marketed to homeowners as the modern scientific answer to household pests. The old household methods, boric acid, physical barriers. Structural inspection were not disproven by any of this. They were reframed as the methods of people who did not have access to real science. The marketing worked. By the time the pest control aisle reached its current state, the three-part system Harold used had been disaggregated into a row of specialty products, each with a different label, each targeting a single pest, each requiring replacement when the can ran out. Ant spray, roach gel, perimeter spray. Ultrasonic deterrent, spider treatment, yard treatment for fleas, each one solving one narrow problem on a 2-week horizon. The old method had become 6 separate products and a service contract for the one it could not handle. The house was not better protected, it was just more dependent on the store. The label got more specific, the aisle got longer, the routine got outsourced, and somewhere along the way, the knowledge that a retired building superintendent in Chicago had been quietly maintaining for 30 years stopped being taught to the people who came after him. Harold did not have a monthly service call because his building was sealed and his system was running, not because his building was unusual. Because the job was designed to be done by the person who lived there, and it was. One of his tenants told him once that her neighbor in the building across the street paid $90 a month for a pest service. Harold asked her if it worked. She said the neighbor still had ants in the kitchen every summer. Harold nodded and said nothing. He had heard that story before. The service was real, the contract was real, the ants were also real. The gap under the kitchen sink pipe, apparently, was also still real. That is the gap the spray cannot close. That is the gap Harold would have found in 20 minutes with a flashlight. There is one part of this system most people still miss. And it is the reason modern homes keep buying the same products over and over. It is the sanitation step, not a chemical, not a powder. A habit that removes the reason pests are coming in. Harold's underlying rule was never about killing pests. It was about making the building a place where pests had nothing worth entering for. Pests do not enter homes because they dislike the outdoors. They enter because the home is offering something the outdoors is not. Food, water, warmth. Those 3 things. All pest pressure on a residence traces back to one of those 3. A leaking pipe under the kitchen sink is a water source that will draw cockroaches regardless of how many times you spray the counter. A loosely stored bag of flour in the pantry is a food source that no boric acid bait can outcompete. A line of dried grease in the lip of a stove burner is a feeding station that a perimeter treatment applied to the outside of the house cannot address. The pest gets inside, finds the resource, and establishes. The barrier is working, but the door was left open from the inside. Harold's twice-yearly inspection was not purely structural. He checked under sinks for moisture, any slow drip that had been running long enough to draw activity. He looked at how food was stored in the pantry. He asked tenants directly whether there was a garbage bin without a lid or whether dry goods were kept in their original paper bags. He was not intrusive about it. He was specific. He knew that sealing the gaps and laying the barrier was only half the job. The other half was removing what was pulling the pests toward those gaps in the first place. When you remove the attractant, the pressure on the barrier drops. Pests that do make it through a gap find nothing worth establishing near. The bait handles the colony. The barrier stops the crossers. The sealed structure limits the entry. And the clean, dry, tightly stored pantry removes the reason any of it was necessary to begin with. Modern pest products do not sell you this step because it is not a product. It requires no bottle, no spray, no monthly delivery. It is a habit. And a habit does not have a UPC code. This is the part Harold always checked last. And it was the part that made everything else keep working. One final note. If you are dealing with a severe, active infestation, particularly rodents inside walls or floors, or a heavy cockroach presence that has become structural, call a professional. This system is a barrier and a prevention method. It is designed to keep the problem from establishing. If the problem is already established and significant, professional intervention is appropriate, and Harold would have told you the same thing. What this system is the reason you may never get to that point. There is also a word about rodents specifically because the risk is not only structural. If you find rodent droppings, gnaw marks on cables, or nesting material, the cleanup matters as much as the pest control. Do not sweep dry rodent droppings with a broom. Do not vacuum them with a household vacuum. The hantavirus is transmitted through rodent waste and becomes airborne as fine particles when those droppings are disturbed. The correct method: wear disposable gloves and a dust mask. Saturate the droppings with a diluted bleach solution, roughly 1.5 cups of bleach per gallon of water, let it sit for 5 minutes, then remove it with disposable paper towels. Seal everything in a bag, wash your hands. That sequence is the one the CDC recommends for a reason. Rodents also chew through electrical wire insulation as part of normal tooth maintenance. Gnaw marks on cables, breakers tripping without explanation. And any burning smell from an outlet or wall cavity are signs that require an electrician before any pest response. Harold found damaged wiring twice in 30 years. Both times he stopped what he was doing and called the electrician. Pest management and electrical safety are not the same job. Harold retired in his early 70s. He handed the metal box to the building's new superintendent before he left. He told him the same thing he told everyone. Seal the gaps before you apply anything. Remove what is drawing them in before you try to kill what came through. Run the routine in spring and fall whether you see activity or not. The new super called an exterminator that first winter. The building had a cockroach problem it had not seen in 25 years. He called Harold. Harold came back with the box. They walked the building together for a day, found the gaps that had not been sealed in the 2 years since Harold left. Found a pantry in Unit 4 with open paper bags of dry goods sitting on a wood shelf. Found a slow drip under a first-floor kitchen sink that had been running since October, slowly pooling behind the cabinet base. Harold showed the new super where the boric acid bait went. Showed him how thin the line of diatomaceous earth needed to be, not a pile, a line, fine as chalk dust along the baseboard edge. Showed him how to look for the gap before he applied anything. The new super wrote everything down on a yellow notepad. Harold never looked at the notepad. He already knew the routine by memory. By spring, the problem was gone. Without a second exterminator call, without a service contract, without anything that was not already available at the hardware store for under $30. The exterminator who had been called that first winter charged $240 for a single visit. He treated the visible surfaces. He did not find the drip. He did not find the open bags. He did not find the gap under the utility pipe that had never been sealed. Harold found all three on the same afternoon he arrived with the metal box. A quarterly professional pest control service for a home runs somewhere between $100 and $300 per visit. A full annual contract with monthly check-ins can run well over $1,000 a year depending on the market and the service tier. Harold's 3-part system, boric acid, food-grade diatomaceous earth. Steel wool and caulk costs somewhere between $15 and $30 for materials that last multiple application cycles. The annual cost of running the routine is the cost of your time and a tube of caulk, Harold used to say. The pest is never the problem, the open door is the problem. If you are the kind of person who would rather close the door than keep buying the spray, this channel is for you. Drop a number in the comments. How many pest products are under your kitchen sink right now? Not judging, just counting. If this kind of system is what you are looking for, subscribe. Because next time we are going into the laundry room, where most modern homes are running 4 or 5 detergents that replaced a single shelf of materials that cleaned everything for a fraction of the cost. The old shelf was shorter. The clothes came out the same. That is not an accident.